Hey there, hope you're doing good. Today we'll talk about date and time data types. MySQL has two data types used to represent a date and time. Date time and timestamp, the first two items in this list. Both of them have a year, month, hour, minute and second. But they represent completely different things. Date time doesn't have a time zone. It's just a set of year, month, date, hour, minute, second values. So, for example, if I were to ask you, when are you going to celebrate New Year's Day next? The answer would be Jan 1st, 2023, 00:00:00. This would be your answer. But this would represent different times in different countries. The Japanese would celebrate it at a different time from in India, right? They would celebrate it earlier than India. And London would celebrate it after India. It happens at different times, but the values are the same because it doesn't have a time zone. MySQL uses date time for this, Java uses local date time class, and this is a local date time class. And different languages use different classes. The second concept is a timestamp. It looks similar to date time, but you should not use it interchangeably. It represents a completely different concept. It's like saying you can measure weight in pounds, you can measure currency in pounds, British pounds, but they're not the same thing, right? Though they look same. Similarly, a timestamp has a time zone. That's the difference as compared to the date time. But when you add a time zone, it represents a point in history, an instant in time. So if you ask when did man first walk on the moon, the answer is July 20, 1969 at 2:56 a.m. GMT. The same moment is 16 or 26 a.m. IST, whatever it turns out to be. It's the same instant in time when Armstrong set foot on the moon, but the representation is different in different time zones. In India, it's 8 hours. In GMT, it is 2 hours. So you should not use date time to represent when a meeting happens. Because if you have some people in your team in the US and some in India and you say the meeting happens at 9 a.m., then the Americans will connect to the meeting at a different time from the Indians. Because that's what date time is. It means 9 a.m. in the abstract. So if you're building a calendar app, you should use timestamp to represent when a meeting starts, not date time. You see the difference? On the other hand, if you are asking when is Christmas, you should use date time to represent that. Because Christmas starts at different times in different cities. And in Java, there's an instant class, which represents an instant in time. So if you look at the difference in the implementation, timestamp has a time zone, whereas date time doesn't. But you can't convert a timestamp to a date time just by deleting the time zone, because those are two different concepts. It's like saying I'll convert weight in pounds to currency amount British pound. If I'm buying 10 kgs of rice, 10 pounds of rice, I can't say I've paid 10 pounds for the rice, right? So even though they look similar, the concepts are different, which is why you can't translate between them that way. Moving on from date time and timestamp, let's discuss the concept of an interval, the last one, which is easiest to understand. It just represents a period of time, not an instant in time, but a period, like 1 hour. So if someone asks how long is this meeting, the answer is 1 hour. And that is an interval data type. Or if you have a subscription where it's a monthly subscription and you ask how long is each subscription period, the answer is 1 month. Interval is not to be used when you want to track when a meeting starts. That's a timestamp. Now let's discuss a little more complicated concept called monotonic time. Let's say you have a clock and there's this insightful proposal on the Go bug tracker. You should read this. I've read this multiple times over the years. It's extremely insightful. So basically what they say is all the devices, be it a smartphone, anything else, its clock is reset using a protocol called NTP. And when it is reset, it can go forward if it was behind, or it can go back if it was forward. Like right now the time is 10:32 p.m. If my phone were set to 10:42 somehow by mistake, and then it synchronizes with the server, then it will go back to 10:32. It will go back 10 minutes in time. But the problem is, suppose at that instant I'm using a timer app to measure something. Say how long a ball takes to reach the ground floor when I drop it from the 7th floor. Let's say I use the timer to measure that. Let's say it takes 1 minute. So I start the timer, drop the ball, and in 1 minute it reaches, I stop the timer. And let's say I have this code. I measure the start time, then I do the work, in this case dropping the ball, then I measure the time and I subtract. Now the problem is, because the clock went back 10 minutes, it will record the time as -9 minutes. Because I dropped the ball at 10:40, let's say, it reached at 10:41, but then the time went back 10 minutes back to 10:31. So if you drop the ball at 10:40 and it reaches at 10:31, then it took -9 minutes. So the moral of the story is, if you are measuring the time, you should not reset the clock in between. So let's say you are asked to time a running race, and you are using your wristwatch. The starting pistol fires and the runners start running. Halfway through the race, you're not going to ask the guy next to you what is the time and adjust your watch, right? Because the timing will go off. So you want to adjust your watch if you want to ask what is the time now. You don't want to adjust your watch if you want to ask how long is something taking, if you want to measure time. So that is why computers have two clocks. In addition to the usual clock, which returns a timestamp, you have a monotonic clock. The difference is, the monotonic clock, as the name says, never decreases. This code is guaranteed to return a non-negative value. And the only purpose of a monotonic clock is to take two time entries and subtract from each other, like in this case. That's the only thing you can do with it. If you look at the value, the epoch may be random. For example, the monotonic clock of a computer can record time from the instant it has booted, not a fixed epoch like Jan 1st, 1970. Which is why you should not look at the value of a monotonic clock, because the epoch is undefined. In fact, Java says that if you have two JVMs running on the same PC, the monotonic clock can even be different for both. Or I think that's the case for Go, one of the languages. I don't remember which language it is. So in that case, you can't even compare the value of monotonic clock across two programs running on the same computer, because that's not what it's meant for. It's meant for measuring the elapsed time using code like this. Again, you should read this Go page. It is very insightful. So the point is, to summarize all of this, there are all these data types. There's a date time, there's a timestamp. You can use a monotonic clock or a non-monotonic clock, or you can use an interval data type to measure how long something took. These are different concepts. Understand the differences and use the correct one for your needs.